Hello and welcome to the Contrarians, where we're right and you're wrong. Before we get to the show, let's get the pleasantries out of the way.
First of all, our website. If you want more information about our little podcast, go to wearethecontrarians.com. That's where you'll find links to our old episodes, to our Patreon channel, and to our awesome Contrarians merch.
You can show your support by buying a Contrarians mug or a pillow.
I like the laptop bags myself.
Second of all, if you enjoy the show, tell your friends. Or even go a step further and leave us a 5-star review on whatever platform you use to listen to your podcasts.
Finally, if you want to reach out directly to us, that's what social media is for. Find us on Twitter and Instagram at Contrarian Prime, or check out our Facebook page at facebook.com/Contrarian Prime.
Julio runs our official Twitter account at Contrarian Prime, but if you want to give me a piece of your mind or just want to banter about pro wrestling, you can follow me at Contrarian Alex.
And that's it. That's our intro.
Now, time for the show.
This is our lesson.
And we are recording for Contrarians Corner for The Long Goodbye.
Hello, and welcome back to the Contrarians, where we're right and you're wrong. My name is Alex, joined as always here on the eternal fight of the contrary is my co-host Julio Oliveira. Julio, it's not often that we dive into noir, and you historically aren't the biggest fan of the genre, so how you feeling coming into today's episode?
I think that we need to set the record straight. We've done one, I think, noir movie on the show, and out of the two of us, you are the one who doesn't even remember the movie. Referring, of course, to Mute, neo-noir that Alex has completely blocked from his memory.
Was that the one with Paul Rudd with a mustache?
Yes.
Okay, I remember that. That's the extent of it,
There
though.
you go. Okay, well, and then, well, we both liked Under the Silver Lake on the Patreon. So
yes. So we're,
half and half.
We're batting 500.
Yeah.
But going back in our time machine, as we typically stick within the past 30 years of filmmaking, going way back to 1973, with The Long Goodbye, a familiar name to the Contrarians. It's been a long time since he showed up too, but Robert Altman, but making his debut, Elliott Gould in the
not quite, Alex. The Muppathon. He was in two Muppet movies.
Yeah, he tried to fuck Miss Piggy. I forgot about that. You're right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Also, in a way, you could say he wasn't physically part of the Friendstravaganza, but he was part of the Friendstravaganza. He's Ross and Monica's dad.
I guess I should just clarify. Leading man Elliott Gould making his debut
Yes.
as Phillip Marlowe, who was a character with a bit of backstory. We'll get into that a bit more in the second half, though. But just get right into it, Julio. We are joined today by a guest who I guess you could say, and to some extent, specializes in the genre. Julio, who's going to be helping us ring in The Long Goodbye?
Yes, this is a long time coming. Our friend Dale Bridges, those of you who have been listening for a while, you've kind of been tracking the story of how we got to this episode. Because Dale contacted us. He had a book that he had written, and he let us read it, and we liked it a lot. And we told you about it, and then we said, this guy's pretty funny. It would be funny to have him on the show and talk about a noir movie, because his book has a lot to do with film noir. And so here we are. We told Dale, hey, pick a movie that you would like to do on the show. And I don't know why it never even crossed my mind that he was going to pick The Long Goodbye, because there's other noir titles that kind of like jump to the top of the list. And I was bracing myself for something from the 40s. And I was like, I'm going to have to really, really get through Humphrey Bogart being weird. But instead, he gave us Elliott Gould. And so here we are. Dale, welcome to the Contrarians.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And Elliott Gould is being weird here, too. So, I mean, we didn't get completely out of the weird.
That's true.
There's some fairly problematic behavior throughout this movie.
Yeah, problematic,
Well, it's
for
not
sure.
limited to Elliott Gould. It's just all through. That was the 70s, Alex. America was a problematic country. Thank God we've moved past that, and we're okay.
Yeah, we have that behind us now.
Dale, let's before we go into what we do here on the show, let's talk a little bit about your book so that it makes a little more sense for the people that are listening. Obviously, I don't want you to spoil the book for anyone, because I think it's a delight to read and just kind of like see the twists and turns as they unfold. But tell us a little bit about the book. What is this Mean Reds business?
Yeah, you bet. I would say probably a lot of your listeners, and that's kind of how I know when people will probably like the book, is if they sort of know what the title means or have an inkling. But it's a quote from Breakfast at Tiffany's where Holly Golightly is she's saying that she gets depression once in a while, and her potential paramour is like, oh, you get the blues, and she's like, no, these aren't the blues, these are the mean reds, which is quoted in the book. That movie is one of the narrator's favorites. He is a movie reviewer in a small town, and he's just sort of obsessed with older movies. And he writes movie reviews for the local paper. It's a small alt-weekly paper. And at the beginning of the book, there is an unfortunate death of an exotic dancer at an unpopular strip club. And it's a small paper, and everybody else is busy. And so the editor says, you have to write this story about that. And it happens to be on the same day that a local film festival is starting. And so he is sort of trying to juggle both very badly. He's a very bad journalist, while also imbibing quite a bit of alcohol and drugs, and everything goes horribly wrong.
Sounds like a good time at the... Well, I was going to say at the movies, but really a good time of reading. This is even before watching the Long Goodbye, because you could draw a lot of parallels, I think, between your book and The Long Goodbye, and we will, I think, on the second half of the show. But even before watching Long Goodbye, you can also draw parallels between your book and a whole bunch of noir movies, because he's a detective, and the plot gets more and more complicated as he goes along. There is
that's what he's trying to do, for sure. He wants to be the detective in the noir movie, and he's sort of forcing that narrative onto the situation, even though it doesn't always fit. Yeah And quoting a lot from old movies. There's a lot of old movie references constantly throughout, and noir is sort of the premier genre of that he's using in the book.
Yeah, that's something I called out, actually. The first time I told Alex about it, it was just the movie references just hit you here, there. And that could always, I think it's risky, because I think that maybe, I was 100% the audience for this book, because I was catching all of them. And even the ones that I didn't know 100%, I was like, oh, but I know I've heard of this. And it was just, these were my people. They were like speaking my language. And I don't know. I'm very curious to see how my wife will react to reading it, because she's not as much of a cinephile. I want to know what the experience is like when you read it and you're not a cinephile, and you're just... I was watching the Clockwork Orange the other night, and they make up their own language in that movie.
Yeah, right.
So if you don't know the movie references, is that kind of like the experience of reading this book of, I don't know what they're talking about, but it makes sense.
Yeah, what is this odd sort of movie reference? Yeah, it is absolutely a book for film nerds, sort of unapologetically, hopefully, and let me know how your wife perceives it too, because I am also interested. So far, it's been pretty well received by people who, just like movies a normal amount, not like us. Who watch them and then debate them constantly or whatever. So I think there's the hard movie references, the one where even hardcore movie nerds, because I've dropped some Easter eggs in there with like character names and stuff that are pretty obscure, that you kind of like that, and they might even just be from me. And then some really light stuff that sort of everybody has heard about, and hopefully, if you haven't heard of the things, it doesn't obstruct the plot for you. That's mostly the feedback I've been getting so far. But I wrote the book that I wanted to read, and people like us would want to read, and I hope it connects to the larger public too. But that was the book that I wanted to write, so I didn't worry about too much as far as that goes, like whether or not everybody else was going to be able to pick up on everything. But I think they are. People have been responding well so far.
That's good to hear. Now, leading a little bit into the Long Goodbye and the noir of it all, did you just happen to fall into noir when you decided to write this book, or what came first, the Mean Reds or noir? For you, like, were you like, I'm gonna write a book that's steeped into the noir tropes, or is that just something that happened as you started writing the story?
Yeah, good question. It was definitely not preconceived. I we've talked about this. My love of old movies kind of comes from being raised in a very religious household. My dad was a fundamentalist preacher in a small town. I wasn't allowed to go to the movie theater or dances or, listen to music, which is a lot like Footloose, but with slightly less Kenny Loggins music. But I was allowed to watch old movies because, there was no nudity, there was no profanity. And, there's some serious stuff happening in old movies, but it just wasn't the type of stuff that my dad was concerned about. So I was allowed. And so while all my peers were like, watching all the John Hughes movies and different things like that, I was watching Bogart and Bacall and all those old movies. And that's where my nostalgia and my love of movies first developed. And so when I started thinking of this book, I was more just thinking of me, like my life as a character at that period in my life. I was working at a newspaper and I was the arts and entertainment editor. So I was doing reviews of, movies and books and TV and stuff like that. And so I was just sort of thinking about that character for a long time and sort of developing that idea, and then bringing in the plot of the exotic dancer who dies, which is also something that happened while I was working for the newspaper.
Oh, wow.
Not the death of an I should go back. A strip club opened on the Pearl Street Mall in Boulder, Colorado, and the locals freaked out. That is what happened.
Okay.
Because the Pearl Street Mall is like their center shopping district. And we suddenly got all these, emails from soccer moms and dads about how, what was going to happen is it drugs and prostitution next. And I wrote a story about it. And so and so I sort of incorporated that. And there's a local film festival there called the Boulder International Film Festival that I had a press pass to. So, I started incorporating all these things into an idea, and the noir genre just fits so well, right? Of the character, as I was thinking of, becomes more and more, a delusional character that, is just wrapped up in his own fantasy world. And that's just sort of the perfect fantasy world for this particular scenario. So I do love noir movies, but the fact that this book is so noir heavy was just more of it works well with the plot. And I did go, and it also gave me an excuse to go back and watch all the noir that I'd seen and rewatch it and then watch all this new stuff. So I just went on a binge, and it was just, that excuse to completely succumb to the things that you love. So it was I could write it off as research, and it was a lot of fun.
I think that sets the table well, because having binged all those noir movies, I'm sure The Long Goodbye was part of that that marathon. And so I'm really looking forward to what you have to say about it once we get to Real Talk. Before, I don't even know if you like this movie or if you just thought it would be good for discussion. So I have no idea how Contrarians Corner is going to go for you. But I know Alex and I hadn't seen it before. So I guess, Alex, do you wanna explain what we do here in the Contrarians before we launch into Contrarians Corner?
So if this is your first time listening, thank you so much. If you're a returning listener, this is the part where we explain what we do, so just hang tight with us. So here on the Contrarians, we like to rage against the Rotten Tomatoes machine. That is our battle cry. Find a movie on Rotten Tomatoes that is highly rated, a lot of times known as certified fresh, and what we'll do is cut that movie down to size and explain perhaps why that high score, that high percentage, that beautiful IP, the trademarked logo of certified fresh maybe isn't telling the whole story. Some aspects that critics may have gotten wrong about their reviews or thoughts on said film. Conversely, find a movie that is lowly rated, about 30% and below is where we typically shoot, and make a case, as you can imagine, for that film's positive merit, maybe why that low rating isn't exactly just, being that The Long Goodbye is towering 95% on the old RT. In the first portion here, we will be bringing it down to size. Oh, it has the certified fresh logo as well, so it's extra tasty. But that all goes into comprising the first half of our podcast, what we call Contrarians Corner. And we do this, our mission statement comes basically from two ideals. One, Obviously, shit is subjective. You could be as over the moon or as cynical about something as you want to be if you set your mind and your heart to it. Number two, that Julio and I find a lot of times that people don't really understand, maybe not understand, but maybe put too much value in those Rotten Tomatoes scores. And we find often that they don't always tell the whole story of a movie, and that it's kind of difficult to give a percentage rating to a movie when there's all types of shit that goes into it. But again, that's the first half. That's Contrarians Corner. Julio, if listeners want to know how you and I, and in the case of today, our guests feel about the movie we're discussing, they just need to hang around for part two, the second half.
That is correct. Part 2, the aptly titled Real Talk. That's where we tell you how we really feel about the movies. We forget about the tomato meter score, forget about the gimmick. It's just how we experienced, in this case, The Long Goodbye. First time watch for me. I'll be honest with you guys, I watched it 1.5 times. Because I was, based on my previous experience with noir, I was like, I'm going to need at least 2 watch throughs just to piece it all together. But then I got sick, ran out of time. So halfway through, I had to restart it and just start taking notes. So I wonder how that affected my experience. Alex, you just watched it this morning. Dale has probably watched it 50 times. If you guys want to know how we really feel about Elliott Gould's misadventures in LA, for real, not doing the Contrarians Corner thing, just check out Real Talk. But like Alex said, this is super fresh. So first, we're going to be very negative about it in Contrarians Corner.
Where did you go last night, Marlowe?
Oh, is this where I'm supposed to say, what is all this about? And he says, shut up, I asked the question.
Yeah, that's right, Marlowe.
All right, well, The Long Goodbye, as I mentioned, we're going back to 1973, released on March 7th of that year. Directed by Robert Altman, who coming into this, The Delinquents, Countdown, The Cold Day in the Park, MASH, Brewster McCloud, McCabe and Mrs. Miller, and Images was his feature film credits that he was writing coming into this. Written by Lee Brackett. No, not the sheriff from Halloween, not Charles Cypher. But of course, the Charles Cypher's character in Halloween was named after this Lee Brackett.
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yeah. And along with the rest of the world, we all learned that Charles Cypher is still alive when Halloween Kills came out a few years ago.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So, The Long Goodbye stars Elliott Gould in the leading role. It is a noir. It's based on The Long Goodbye, the Raymond Chandler novel from 1953. And at the time, the reception was lukewarm, to say the least, but today stands with a 95% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. So, Julio, the critics that contribute to that score, what are they saying about Monica and Ross's dad in the leading role here?
All right, I'm going to start with Noel Murray from The Dissolve, who says, The Long Goodbye as a whole peels back the surfaces of Private Eye stories, paying special attention to their macho bluster and abused women. A lot of abused women in this movie. Alex, were you rattled? But were you expecting this from The Long Goodbye? Because that was one of the things where I was like, man, I thought we were going to have a good time. And then it's just these big, burly men slapping women around. It was really a turnoff.
Yeah, not to jump too far ahead, but the our crime lord, I forget his name, the little squirrely
His
guy.
name
Looks
is
like
Marty Augustine.
Augustine, that's it. Yes.
Yeah.
Mark Rydell. Yeah, that's not unlike the scene in the '89 Batman where Jack Nicholson's just like, Bob, gun, and then shoots Bob, and he has that. In this case, though, it's a Coca-Cola bottle that he smashes over his mistress's face, and
A little
that
more
scene,
distressing.
Yeah, and it does not really cut away too quickly. You just kind of have to watch it. So there is some disturbing sequences in this movie, I will say.
Yeah, I think that it's okay to demystify, deconstruct the genres, but should we do it at the cost of fun? Like, Mr. Altman, can we just have fun with a detective story instead of watching the abuse unfold uncut? I'm not sure that I'm behind that. Next, Patrick McDonald from WBGR-FM, Monroe, Wisconsin, says this is 1970s Los Angeles at its finest, wrapped up and delivered by the master Robert Altman, and Elliott Gould as Phillip Marlowe is a tick-filled cat lover at his finest kind. Dale, I'm going to go on a limb and say that you are a cat person, because there's a cat in your book, and you have paintings of cats on your Instagram.
There's a cat sleeping right beside me as we speak. Yes.
Good man.
I am a cat person.
I have 4 cats. And the way that Elliott Gould handles his cat in this movie gave me anxiety. Is that something? Am I being too sensitive, or is he a terrible pet owner?
I hadn't thought of it like that, but yeah, I mean, he does sort of manhandle that. I love this cat. It's like the most expressive cat, and maybe my favorite cat scene of any movie. The cat's the best actor in the entire. I guess it was 2 cats, by the way. Anybody who's interested, 2 identical cats that did the Mary-Kate and Ashley thing, I guess, in the movie. But yeah, that whole funny scene where the cats, I don't know how that cats are like jumping up on his shoulder. The cat's like, getting on the thing. He does definitely miss it. And then he just loses the cat. And he's a very bad cat owner for sure.
Yeah, the biggest question in the movie is like, what happened to the cat? And it never gets answered. So, for shame. Alan R. Howard from The Hollywood Reporter says, The Long Goodbye is a gloriously inspired tribute to Hollywood that never loses sight of what Los Angeles has become. What has Los Angeles become?
I am hopeful that that expression or quote, love letter to Hollywood, did not fucking exist in 1973. If you said something like that, you get slapped for saying that. So I resent that review.
Well, Alex, we were just talking. You just came back from L.A. And so now watching a movie about L.A., did you draw parallels? Could you see like the echoes of the 70s in your adventures in L.A. a couple of weeks ago?
I mean, yeah, like on Hollywood Boulevard and shit, like they really try to maintain a feel of yesteryear in Hollywood and whatnot.
How many topless women doing yoga did you see while you were in LA?
Sadly, none. But
according to this movie, you should have saw at least a dozen.
Yeah,
at least.
Maybe you were not looking up because they're all on the top floor.
That's what I need to do. I need to go back and do because I didn't do any of the tours. I want to do like the Real Crime tour, and then I also need to do like the Hollywood tour.
Look for apartments that have a stoplight outside on the balcony. That's how you know for sure.
That's where the real shit is happening, Alex.
That's where they point it. If you look up there, you can see Elliott Gould's House of Horrors that are currently performing yoga topless on the deck.
All right, we're going to close with Sean Levy from The Oregonian, who says, when he was very near the top of his early peak, Robert Altman did the darndest thing and made a Private Eye movie, or maybe a parody of a Private Eye movie. It's hard to say, and he may never have topped it. I think it's a problem when people can't tell if you're doing an actual movie or a parody movie. You should be able to know that. So if Sean Levy can't tell, I don't know why he gave it a fresh tomato. I was like, too confusing. Where do we land on this? Is this Robert Altman making the worst detective movie on purpose, or making the worst detective movie not realizing it?
Is this Robert Altman's Hangover 3? Is this, where we'll debate till the end of time if it was like cynical and purposeful or just actually really bad?
It's a heartfelt love letter to Hollywood and detectives, Alex.
I'm not sure about that. I could see someone through like modern lenses observing a movie like this and thinking that, some of the strange or, I mentioned the word problematic earlier, the aspects of it are like intentional. And it's like, nah, that's just how they did shit back then, making Al Jolson jokes in the police station.
That was just law enforcement back in the 70s. Again, we've come a long way. So pat yourself in the back, America.
Altman has a weird relationship with Hollywood in general, and his movie, like The Player, is like, not saying a lot of positive things about Hollywood. So yeah, it's hard to say, but he's an interesting filmmaker in that aspect, as for sure.
What's her first name?
Eileen.
What's their address?
Jimmy Stewart?
Right.
All right, well, let's get to this. Since we do have a guest, I'll kind of just more guide the premise here, as we will do from time to time. Our friends at Wikipedia will kick us off. After looking for cat food at a supermarket, Phillip Marlowe discovers his close friend, Terry Lennox, in his home. Lennox asks for a lift from Los Angeles to the California-Mexico border at Tijuana. Marlowe obliges. On returning home, Marlowe is met by two police detectives who ask questions about Lennox and then arrest Marlowe because he refuses to answer any questions. During questioning, Marlowe learns that Lennox has been accused of killing his wife, Sylvia. After he is jailed for 3 days, the police release him because they have learned that Lennox has committed suicide in Mexico. The police and press seem to believe it is an obvious case, but Marlowe does not accept the official facts. As we mentioned, Phillip Marlowe, this is not his debut as a character. We'll get into that a little bit more in the second half, but Elliott Gould in the lead here. And yeah, guys, the first 10 minutes of this movie is a quest for cat food.
Yes. It keeps going. You think that it was just a cute opening bit, but then he comes back and we're like, oh, we're still dealing with the cat food thing. We watch him try to fool his cat into thinking that he got the right kind of food, and when he got the wrong kind of food, it just keeps going on. And I think that is this movie in a nutshell. It just keeps going on and on about things, not particularly interested in moving the plot forward.
The Coens definitely liked this movie. Like that whole like opening in the grocery store and the Big Lebowski in the grocery store. Yeah, there's so many weird parallels. And thinking of like who was making a parody noir movie for sure. Like, like did the Coens just decide to go all in on that and say one up Robert Altman? Or
I think so. I think that's they saw the potential in what Robert Altman had tried to do, and they're like, okay, but how about we actually make it funny? And then they just cast Jeff Bridges. But that's actually a really good point because. I mean, we already said we don't have that much experience with noir, but there is a clear shift between the protagonist that we have here in The Long Goodbye, who is more along the lines of what you will see later with the dude in The Big Lebowski and, even somebody like Andrew Garfield in Under the Silver Lake, right? He's just disheveled. He doesn't have his shit together. He's just kind of like bumbling around life. And just a few weeks ago, I watched The Big Sleep. I mentioned it on the show because I wanted to prepare for The Long Goodbye by watching what Humphrey Bogart's take on the character of Phillip Marlowe. And it is night and day. The way that Marlowe is presented in the Big Sleep. I know, Alex, you haven't seen it, but you can probably kind of imagine if I tell you it's Humphrey Bogart playing Phillip Marlowe. He's quippy, but not in the way that Elliott Gould is here, where Gould, it kind of sounds like he's just stoned and he's just mumbling, sometimes to himself, sometimes to other people. Like, Bogart is just very exact in the way that he delivers his dialogue. And he looks like he is actually running a private detective business. I don't know what Elliott Gould looks like. I don't know how he makes a living here. And it's distressing. So what's the deal here? Like, is it just like the reinvention of the private detective stereotype, and making him more relatable or making him more of a loser? Is that you being the noir person here, just by default, Dale? How do you reconcile the two versions of Phillip Marlowe and those two decades?
That's one of the main reasons that I picked this movie. I thought about it for a while, and I wanted to pick something that sort of bridged the gap between classic noir and like the neo-noir that, we still sort of have going today. And I feel that this movie is the one, and is part of the reason why it was so badly received when it came out is they talk a lot in interviews and stuff about the poster and how they got the poster wrong. If you've seen the old posters, the first poster was like a cool one that you would expect Marlowe to be on, like a Humphrey Bogart type poster with the tagline of "Nothing says goodbye like a bullet," and it was all cool and sexy, and people were expecting that like classic noir story, and then they got to this very first mumblecore movie where Elliott Gould is murmuring under his breath all the goddamn time, and his the first 10 minutes is about a cat he can't find. He's not a very good detective. He can't even find the cat. And he's like, he's all rumpled. He's disheveled. He does wear a tie, but like he looks like crap the whole time. It's a crap suit. And so, yeah, I think it sort of bridges the gap between the two, and plays around somewhat with that, and maybe successfully, maybe not. There's definitely the jury's out on that part.
Well, Alex, do you think it's our loss that we lost the archetype of the put together detective in favor of the detective that can't even find his own cat?
I mean, what's the goalpost? Who's like our put together detective, Julio, that you would look at as being like, this is who we need in noir films?
Well, see, now for me is Bogart, because I having watched The Big Sleep, I'm like, oh, that's what everybody's been talking about all this time, you know? Even before watching The Big Sleep, I think I knew that. I mean, I knew that he was in it. And I'd seen The Maltese Falcon, and, you know, he's also there, you know, a detective there. And I think there's something regal about the black and white. So and when you see Elliott Gould in full Technicolor, just unshaven, greasy, sweaty.
And kind of
Everyone
a
is sweaty.
gritty color too. Yeah, everybody is sweaty, and it's kind of a gross color too. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it just feels like I feel a little bit of like I need to take a shower after I watch this movie.
Wondering why haven't they showered? Like him, the cops, the people,
everybody.
Yeah.
Listen, someday all the pigs are going to be in here and all the people are going to be out there.
You can bet on that. Listen, Dave, remember, you're not in here. It's just your body. See you when you get out.
The problem with The Long Goodbye is that I feel like the movie wants me to take it seriously, and part of it is just because of the name involved. You know, Robert Altman. Oh, he's like a serious filmmaker, and then just the way it's shot and everything, and there's like tinges of I would say social political commentary throughout the movie that makes me feel like I'm supposed to be, you know, taking this Marlowe guy seriously. His adventures are happening in real America where there's racism and, you know, social strife out there. Some dude's girlfriend got arrested for being at a protest, and then he is in jail because he hit the cop that arrested her. And all I was like, oh, that is the real world. But then we have all this other stuff that doesn't really, you know, that I don't find as compelling. So yeah, that's my take. I think that we didn't need the deconstruction of the detective archetype in a serious movie. I think we needed it in a comedy, which came later.
So we get to our first example of the theme of the movie, The Long Goodbye, which is the only song, with the exception of the opening and closing, that plays throughout it. They just do like different covers of it. It gets very, very tiresome. Terry Lennox is introduced, as I mentioned. He looks extremely suspicious, has scratches on his face, and his fists are bloodied up, unlike you know, bare knuckle prize fighter. So he puts his driving gloves on, a la Ryan Gosling in Drive many years later. Shows up, go to Tijuana, drops him off. Elliott comes back, as we mentioned, questioned, arrested. We do see an example of some terrific customer service, though, in the jailhouse, as the gentleman that helped him the night before at the supermarket's also been arrested and asks how the cat food was, or how his cat's doing. So,
he was better in the jail than he was at the supermarket. He was dismissive in the supermarket.
It's true. Very problematic interrogation scene, including homophobia and blackface, if you can believe it, all in the same sequence. I mean, what more is there to say other than, you know, that's just how things were back then?
It's true. It was the 70s. These cops, are we supposed to dislike them, Alex? I guess that's how you get us on board with the Marlowe character. You just put him surrounded by people that are so hateful that we're like, okay, we got to side with Elliott Gould now.
I mean, a little bit of real talk. I mean, this was still Vietnam, and that whole thing was very fresh in everyone's mind. And so, like, the idea of military and police and shit like that it was very easy to make them bad guys in a movie that's meant to appeal to, like, a hipper audience. So they didn't have to do too much. This is where we learn that Sylvia Lennox is dead. I know it said the guy looked crazy suspicious, but, Lennox is dead because Elliott Gould gets freed after being held for 3 days. And we learn that he has allegedly committed suicide.
Did you buy it?
Well, you know what I did buy is the cellmate that Elliott Gould had. Did you catch who that was?
Yeah.
Is it one of the Carradines?
David Carradine, yeah.
David Carradine, yes. Doing a great job.
Is he uncredited?
He is uncredited. Both him and another significantly large name in this movie is uncredited, or are uncredited, excuse me. Just kind of random. One of those, you guys mentioned Coen's. I think there's a lot, like Quentin Tarantino probably watched this movie and masturbated quite a bit when he was younger. Just like the dialogue and that scene is so Tarantino, of having a name that's just there to go on this long interrupted, you know, soliloquy, and then the scene's over and that character never comes back. That's like, you know, Tarantino 101. So
true.
So he's dead in Mexico, committed suicide, he says. Fresh out the joint. Why not? Phillip Marlowe goes to a local watering hole. The only reason I took note of this is because I'm fat and they had a sign on the wall that said 75-cent fish and chips. And I literally, having been in LA a few weeks ago and I paid $20 for fish and chips, I was like, God, what a time to be alive. And also, the bartender is dressed like a 1980s World Wrestling Federation referee. He's got the baby blue shirt with the bow tie on. It was tremendous.
So this is his answering service, right?
This is the bar and his secretary service or whatever.
Because this segues right into he gets a new job, a new case to go scope out with Eileen Wade. Isn't that where she comes into the fray here?
Yeah,
right, she wants him to find her husband. So we're not even, what happened to the mystery of Lennox, right? Because nobody watching the movie buys that he actually committed suicide. We know that that's the big mystery, right? Elliott Gould. Marlowe says that there's no way that he had committed suicide. There's no way that he murdered his wife. So the movie's just opening up the questions like, who's the real killer? Who killed Lennox's wife and who killed Lennox? But then I was like, never mind. Now we're going to go on this missing person's case.
Yeah.
Just leaves you hanging.
We're going to go to this missing persons case in the same apartment area or I don't know. They live in basically the same place.
Yeah, it's the same condominium. Alex, when you went to LA, did you keep running into the same 10 people like Marlowe does in this movie?
Can't say that I did, but one of those things is we're introduced to a character that serves almost no purpose. He comes back up throughout the movie. I don't even know if the character has a name. But now is as good a time as any to talk about him since we've been focusing on Elliott Gould. The area of condominiums where Eileen lives has a security guard at the front that is like, I guess, the comic relief for the movie, because throughout it we see him doing impressions of Jimmy Stewart,
Barbara Stanwyck.
Yeah, and he's just testing out his material. So I guess he's like the actor who's got a side job that's still trying to make it out in Hollywood. But this guy, he deserves his propers because the actor that is, I think if I'm reading this correctly, Ken Sansom is the actor's name, and I believe he is the actor that that was real. Like he took this and he had a side job and he moved out to LA to become an actor and he got this role and he's like, God damn it, I'm going to give this my all. And he goes full board into this.
Yeah, Robert Altman said in an interview, he just sort of showed up and he thought his impressions were terrible. And he's like, yeah, just go. Yeah, do that. I thought his impressions were good. But Altman was like, yeah, he did these terrible impressions of all these hokey, old Hollywood. I was like, yeah, we'll do that a few times. Why not?
So this guy thinks that he's just killing it with the impressions and Altman and the rest of the crew are just giggling behind the camera.
Just telling him, yeah, ham it up. Do more. So you guys can help me out here. Roger Wade is the target who he's trying to track down. And when we do find him, is he being the story is he's a raging alcoholic and he goes to the same place to dry out. But when we find him here, that doesn't necessarily look to be the case. It looks as though he's being held against his will. I mean, obviously more of this comes to fruition as the movie goes on. But I found this a bit confusing as a viewer.
Wouldn't you know it? It's a noir movie with a confusing plot. I think we've reached that part of the story where you just kind of have to throw your hands up in the air and go I guess.
But we also reached the part of Henry Gibson, who is a wonderfully weird little freak. What is wrong with that guy? He's Dr. Veringer, and God, he's so creepy.
I was trying to figure out where the fuck I knew Henry Gibson from. It's, I mean, he has a very storied filmography, but it's Wedding Crashers. He's the priest in that. I couldn't figure out, or the pastor. I can't remember.
He was a character actor in so many old stuff. He's almost always creepy, almost always a creeper. But yeah, the doctor is trying to get Wade to pay the rest of his bill or whatever. It doesn't seem like they can really hold him. It seems more like the doctor has some sort of psychological hold over Wade, but that you don't really understand where it comes from throughout a lot of the movie.
Yeah, I haven't watched this movie 1.5 times. I can tell you that I still don't know how Wade ended up in there. Did he check himself in? Did the doctor check him in? I'm not sure how he ended up there, because obviously he wanted out. So
Also, I would bring up, like, how does Marlowe find this place?
that was my next question.
His wife says he drives out in his usual places. This is not his usual place. And Marlowe just goes straight to there. He doesn't go ask anybody. He doesn't go looking around at several. He just shows up directly at the right place and is like, hey, do you guys know if this guy is here?
Right. Are we supposed to assume that he hit it right on the first clinic that he visited? Or has he been doing this for every clinic in LA? Alex, how do you like this new bad guy, the Dr. Verger?
This guy feels like a mad scientist. He's like Donald Pleasance in the Freak Maker. It's just kind of like, what kind of turn is this movie about to take?
I would also like to point out, like, just if the audience watches it, watch him run. During the scene where he runs after Marlowe, the way he runs is so hilarious and also creepy. I don't know how you run creepy, but he runs creepy.
I like your face, too. I feel you're someone I can trust.
Well, you got me, lady.
Now, femme fatales, kind of a staple of the noir genre. We've had so far in the story the naked yoga neighbors. I don't think they qualify.
Ah, yes.
Now we have this guy's Wade's wife, who is not what I would think of when I think of a femme fatale, but I guess it's the closest this movie gets, right? She seems to have some sort of connection with Marlowe. Were you guys buying that sexual chemistry between them?
I mean, it wasn't what I would consider like hot and heavy, but
Marlowe's strangely non-sexual.
Well, I got the impression that Phillip Marlowe like cleans up, though. That's the part of the movie we don't see. Like, not necessarily like he's not pulling tens all the time, but like I get the impression that like if he wants to go to a bar, he's not coming home alone.
Yeah.
So it was his choice not to hook up with Mrs. Wade, just right here from the start.
Doesn't let pleasure get in the way of business,
I feel she was definitely flirting with him, and he was flirting back in his own weird way. She seems to want to keep him around as a buffer against Roger, her husband, because he's been physically abusive already, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. That guy's big and burly, and I don't think that. I mean, I guess depending on how intoxicated he is, but I don't think that Elliott Gould's Marlowe can stand a chance against this dude.
But I think he's maybe a stand-in for Hemingway or something. Like his outfits also I love. He has like these big billowy white shirts that he wears a belt around his like his not in his pants, like around the shirt, like a toga or something. I'm like, who dresses like that? But also we find later on, I mean, I don't skipping ahead or whatever, but the doctor, I mean, he comes off all tough and blustery, but when it comes right down to conflict, Roger Wade isn't necessarily the man's man that he portrays himself to be.
Yeah, that was disappointing. I was expecting Roger Wade to be, when they finally unleash him, because they build him up as he's gonna be like he's a force to be reckoned with, and ends up nothing. Even his eventual death is pretty unimpressive.
Good a segue as any. Roger Wade, played by Sterling Hayden. Based on what I read, seems like there was a couple scenes of his that were almost entirely improv.
Mm-hmm. Was he drunk?
Yeah, it sounds like that some of that wasn't necessarily a work, that he was shoot drunk for at least.
He was notoriously drunk at this point. I guess during the Red Scare, he had named several actors as far as that blacklist, like 4 or 5 other people, and he just never got over his own. He felt terrible about that and had a drinking problem and never really got over that the rest of his life.
It's heavy shit.
So Robert Altman cast him in this movie where he gets slapped by a smaller man just to humble him.
Yeah.
Get over
exactly, yeah.
This leads into the aforementioned Marty Augustine, Mark Rydell appearing. He's obviously connected or in charge. He's got a bunch of muscle that surrounds him. They attack Phillip. They ransack his apartment looking for cash, and this is where we learn that Terry Lennox owed him a substantial amount of money, and he believes now that he's left that money with Marlowe, which of course Phillip legitimately has no knowledge of this. This is a scene we mentioned where Marty takes a Coke bottle, smashes it over his mistress, girlfriend, whatever terminology you want to use, causes some serious damage. We see her later in the movie. She's got like the old school NBA nose guard on, and her jaw's like wired shut. It's heavy shit, man.
Yeah.
comes kind of out of nowhere.
He also says this great line, I sleep with a lot of girls, but I make love to you.
Dude, that's something you can get away with until you're maybe like 25 if you cheat on your girlfriend or boyfriend and say, I sleep with a lot of people, but I make love to you.
And then you get the Coke bottle to the head.
Right.
Jesus.
Yes. If you can find a Coke bottle anymore.
Yeah, Mexican Coke.
There you go.
It's the big bottle. Okay, so we find out, though, that Augustine is tied up with Wade, as Augustine, if I interpreted this correctly, Augustine owes Wade a bunch of money, so Augustine's falling behind, and this could obviously be bad
that's what
for him.
Wade says. I don't know that that's ever...
He's also a lush. Who knows what the fuck
Yes,
he's talking about?
Because Mrs. Wade says it was the other way around, that Wade owed Augustine money. So there's like three separate things going on.
Yes.
There's the Lennox mystery, who is kind of like left out there in the wind from the beginning of the movie. Then you have the Wade story, which is like, he just found him, by the way. It was, that's how it works out for Phillip Marlowe. They told him find him, and then he went and found him.
Yeah.
And we still had half a movie left, but he just solved that mystery. And then and now the Augustine thread, which is like, he wants the money that Lennox owes him, but then he goes and visits the Wades, and we don't know what he wants. But depending on who you ask, he owes them money or they owe him money.
And the money that that Lennox was supposed to have included a variety of $5,000 bills.
Yeah, we learned this because one of them gets sent to Philip, and I actually got on my phone and I was like,
does this exist?
It did, yeah.
Really?
The $5,000 bill was issued during the Revolutionary War, and they were in circulation and usable up until July 14th of 1969. They were last printed in 1945, but people were still using them for another 20 years after that.
Who was the asshole that would just go to the grocery store and say, can you break this?
Yeah. I got to do laundry.
Yeah, like you get a pack of smokes and you pay with a $5,000 bill. Got to bring in the Garda truck. Learning of this whole money situation, or at least Wade's side of it, Roger Wade's side of it, is this weird scene that's like the Oscar clip for the movie that doesn't involve the lead.
Yes.
It's a big fight between Eileen and Roger that's like, really well played, and is definitely the thing you would show for like, Julio, would this be the best film or best screenplay clip?
Man. No, it has to be best screenplay. I don't think that they'd be so clueless as to not have Elliott Gould in the clip for best movie. That would be,
good call.
Deliciously subversive, but I don't think the Academy's going to do that. No, it would be best screenplay, but it would include one of those shots where you see Elliott Gould in the background, like all the way out there in the beach.
Yeah, out through the window.
Whoever the studio was convinced that Gould was going to be the next guy and just forced Altman to have him in the lead. And he's like, fine, but the best scene of the movie, he's not going to be anywhere to be found.
So is this the heart of the movie though, Alex? Because you're right, it's one of the heaviest scenes, but it's also, I think it feels like the most realistic scenario, which is this toxic relationship, this marriage that's falling apart. He clearly is abusive toward her, and she is trying to leave, but she can't, and now here she's telling him that she's gonna leave.
Well, she's a bit abusive towards him too, talking about how his dick doesn't work and shit. But that's honestly, it's like the most tense scene in the movie, and I was really like afraid he was, we had already had enough man on woman violence in this. I was afraid that's where the scene was going, and I was kind of glad it didn't. But yeah, it's tense, and it's Blue Valentine marriage story. They're just saying really mean things to each other, but he is presumably shit-faced, but has the moment of clarity where he's like, remember the good times we had together.
Yeah.
He also uses I was going to ask you this, Dale, you're a writer, and he brings up writer's block. It's kind of the excuse to be shitty. It's like sometimes when you can't write, it changes you, and then you become a terrible person. Tell me, as a writer, is he full of shit?
I think all movies that depict writers like this are pretty much full of shit. I mean, it's certainly a frustration, but like every writer knows, that sort of stuff sort of comes and goes, and so you just wait it out. until the next thing. But like, obviously, I think there have been, I think it's very, I love that it's Hemingway based, I think, is that, this very macho guy that when you really cut him down, he's kind of like not all that what he's kept to be. And like psychologically Hemingway also, like the few times that he was with like actually strong women, I can't remember who he was with, who was a war reporter, but like she was much more badass than him, and he just couldn't handle it and ended up like, the relationship didn't work out like that. So, but yeah, it reminds me of that. But I like the depiction of a writer of like, it's not a heroic depiction of at all. It's not like romanticized. He's an asshole, and there's a lot of writers like that. So I liked it.
I hope that 20 years from now, we don't hear from you just being stuck in some sort of clinic, trying to force you to pay the $400-$600 that you owe.
I wish you'd take that goddamn J.C. Penney tie off, huh? And settle down with me, and what you and I are going to do is have a little old-fashioned man-to-man drinking party.
Well, that's okay with me, but I'm not going to take my tie off.
All right, you leave.
Marlowe goes down to investigate the case a bit further in Mexico at the scene of the crime. He wants to, talk to the local authorities on, the details of his death and the situation surrounding it, evidence, what have you.
Were you disappointed that we didn't get a full-on Spanish version of the Long Goodbye?
We kind of do.
But we didn't sing it.
The funeral procession.
A mariachi Long Goodbye would have been really cool, I think, actually.
It's
That's
like,
a missed opportunity for sure.
It's exactly like Rocky 3 when the local high school band is playing the Rocky theme song. It's like, why the fuck do they know this song?
Like, why? They saw the other movies, obviously. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Come on.
So this funeral procession had seen the rough cut that they weren't in of the Long Goodbye, and we're like, all right, we got to play this song. We're talking about Altman making sure he gets his shit in this movie. What is up with that just lingering shot of those two dogs having sex in Mexico?
I mean, I guess it's a commentary on it's a dog world.
That couldn't be set up though, right? Like
I hope not.
They just had to have gone to a location and like Altman, the weirdo, his camera finds it and he's like, yeah, I'm just going to cut away from Gould for 20, 30 seconds while we watch these dogs do it.
Yeah, that's exactly what my thought was, because that's not like, speaking of Altman, the player that towards the beginning, that really long uninterrupted shot, that that all depends on the actions of humans, and that's something you can control. You're exactly right. I imagine he's just doing this panning shot, and then he's like, well, these dogs are having sex, I'm gonna linger on it, maybe it'll make the movie, who knows. But I hope this is something he went to like bat for, that the studio was like, all right, we're gonna cut this, and he's like, I walk if you cut this.
We got to talk a little bit about how Mexico is depicted in the movie, don't you think? Like,
a corrupt place where bodies disappear. Immediately
dirty, animals running afoul. Law enforcement's loosey-goosey, to say the very least.
Well, I found it's definitely problematic in some ways, and then some ways more interesting than a lot of movies of this era depict Central or South America. I mean, I've definitely been to a few border towns, and they can be kind of dicey. But this one was particularly like, there's no paved roads. There's like dogs humping in the street. It's a weird depiction. And then the police are they're nicer than the United States police.
That's true. They're just as corrupt, but but they're nicer. They're friendlier.
But I did like they do seem very competent in their corruptness. Like they're very good at like they're very polite.
It's overall, it doesn't paint that terrible. It could be worse. Like I think that if you have to choose between LA and Tijuana in this movie, I mean, it's 50-50.
Yeah, that's a good point. Also, like one of the few times, like Gould is not, he's not callous throughout most of the movie, but I do feel that when they have like a funeral procession there, everybody sort of stands up and there's like they're having a moment of silence, and he's like cracking jokes in the middle of it.
He's not a nice person, Elliott Gould.
Yeah.
He just happens to. I think it's more noticeable in Mexico because it's he's surrounded by nicer people. When he's in LA, he's an asshole, but there are bigger assholes around him. So it just tones him down.
All right, so as the story devolves, we find out a bit more in terms of everyone's own money. Varenger's owned $5,000 from the visit that Wade had with him. Obviously, there's a situation of the money with Wade and Augustine, so it's all just kind of unraveling. And of course, our lead character, Phillip Marlowe, is tied up in all of it. Roger Wade commits suicide by just running out into the ocean. It's pretty terrifying scene because obviously that was filmed on a beach, and there's really
Elliott Gould almost drowned in that scene.
Method
that
acting.
makes sense. That riptides exist, but also just the ocean at night. Like you can't control that. So that scene gave me a lot of anxiety, especially with that dog out there too. And the dog,
and he comes back with the cane in his mouth.
Yeah, he
That's
steals
a nice
the
little
scene.
touch.
Yeah,
dogs and cats steal a lot of scenes in this movie.
This is why, Alex, and I know you don't want to hear this, but this is why we CGI water now to keep people safe.
Unless you're James Cameron, I don't want to hear the argument. All right.
So do you think that what causes this suicide? Because it's never spelled out, but first of all, he was throwing a great party and he got humiliated by the doctor. That's when he gets slapped.
That's a good scene.
But he also hints at maybe thinking that there's something going on between Marlowe and his wife.
That, and then, there's the implied, potential guilt because Marlowe immediately jumps to the conclusion that he's the one that killed Sylvia. Also just drinking. I am fortunate. I enjoy drinking, and I've never been like a depressed or angry drunk. But like watching shit like this, it's like, God damn. If that's how you get when you drink, why do you drink, man? And then, like, it just seems like the bottle pushed him over the edge, and he got in a fight with the ocean and lost really bad.
He did look like he was swinging when he went in there.
Yeah.
He's gone. He's done.
We lost Wade.
We did. And in the wake of that, no pun intended, Phillip Marlowe still seems to be pretty drunk and is trying to, like, piece together this case and figure out, what's going on. And he just like jumps to the conclusion that he killed Sylvia and that he was with Varenger as like his alibi afterwards, and he owed him the $5,000 for that. So he goes up to the cops. He's like, "Hey, I figured it out." And he starts yelling at the detective, what happened, and the cops just like, "Yeah, we know all that. Get the fuck out of my face." And
he kind of badgers a confession out of Eileen, too, which is a time like Marlowe seems sort of buffoon throughout a lot of it. And then there's a certain time where he just like gets real serious and like turns on, I guess, like he can't really be a detective. But he basically like yells at her until she admits that she thinks that her husband killed Sylvia.
Here's the problem, because it all kind of like fits together. He's drunk and he's putting it together and we're putting it together with him.
Yeah.
But then the last 10, 15 minutes of the movie prove that all of this was wrong. None of it, right? Because we know that Wade didn't kill Sylvia, and we know that, Lennox is not dead. So the cops are in the right. They're correct in not taking him seriously because he's 100% wrong.
Right?
I think that it would have been a lot more satisfying if he never figured out, like the movie ends with him believing this. He creates this story that makes all the pieces fit. And then the ending is not him going to Mexico and finding Lennox, but instead he stays in LA, and then we, like the audience, see Lennox still alive in Mexico. And it's like that's the final reveal for us. But the movie's underscoring that really Elliott Gould doesn't know anything. Marlowe's a terrible detective. Maybe he was good back in the day when he was played by Humphrey Bogart. But the point of casting Elliott Gould as Marlowe is to prove that this is just not a viable profession anymore. Like men, after all the drinking and just the way that his life has gone, he's just not. He can't handle these type of mysteries.
Are you lying about Roger? Your crazy Looney Tune husband could have killed Sylvia Lennox.
But with this new information, he goes to visit Marty Augustine. Can one of y'all explain to me the scene? I looked down at my phone to read something about the movie, and then I looked up and they were all like stripping.
Oh, I would love to explain this scene to you.
Please do.
If it was possible.
So they come into the room And Augustine's back to like, I want my money back. And Marlowe's like, I still don't have it or whatever. Joanna, which is the woman that gets hurt, not hurt, she was hit with the Coke bottle, comes back in. This is the first time Arnold is in the group. The group is like this very diverse group. That's one thing about these group of hoods. You got an Italian, you got a Mexican, you got a Jew, you got they sort of point this out. Arnold wasn't in there before, but now he is. And Marty Augustine tells this story about how he came to a realization about what he had done to Joanna was wrong. And he went to apologize to her in the hospital. And he was so moved, like, by his own apology, I guess. He stripped off his clothes to just be like completely naked and completely vulnerable. And then Marlowe makes some sort of half joke about like, yeah, well, I mean, I guess, you want me to strip off my clothes now? And he's like, yeah, he's like, in fact, let's all take off our clothes. And then one of the henchmen, who's Pepe, he goes, but boss, I have a lot of scars and I don't really, and he's like, it's okay. Instead of getting mad, he's like, it's okay, Pepe. I know you're self-conscious about your scars. You could go in the other room while the rest of it. And then everybody proceeds to take off their clothes except for Marlowe, who's just like sitting there like, what's going on? One of the henchmen, Harry, who is Jewish, he's like, yeah, your father was a moiler, yeah, right? You're going to...
Yeah.
So they were going to circumcise Marlowe?
You're going to circumcise Marlowe, and then they find out that the money's back, and they don't have to circumcise Marlowe.
Thus robbing us from a scene where Elliott Gould was actually naked on screen. Couldn't happen. I thought that's where we were headed. They teased us, and then they took it away from us.
So apparently Arnold's agent just contacted Altman and was like, please, like, give him a place, just let him stand in the movie. And at that time, Arnold was going by Arnold Strong. That was his like actor name, Arnold Strong. And so, they just had him come in and stand. And I love you do see a part where Elliott Gould like looks, because Arnold's like right next to him. He looks at him, he kind of glances down at his package and almost cracks up. It's a great scene. Yeah.
Alex, how long did it take you to recognize Arnold Schwarzenegger in this movie?
Immediately. I was about to say, for our listeners, I know we cryptically referenced another big name that was uncredited in this. And yes, it is Arnold Schwarzenegger, 11 years before The Terminator. And,
with a mustache, too.
With a mustache and like the combed over hair, like the long kind of... the hairdo that had a brief comeback a few years ago, but
you can't not notice him. He just like when he's just not he doesn't look like a human being.
No,
so when he's on screen, you're like you can't look away from him.
That's the thing that's always funny about Arnold is like people remember. I mean, most people, if you polled people in the streets, remember him as huge, but when they think of that, they think of Terminator, they think of Predator, Commando, that era. And like this was, Mr. Olympia era Arnold, and he's just like a fucking house. He's a wall, and
each
immediately
muscle
when
is its own like ecosystem. Like
that saying, he's got muscles in places most people don't have places. Right when he stepped into light, I was like, that's fucking Arnold Schwarzenegger. I couldn't believe it.
I forgot he was in the movie, to be honest with you. Yeah,
but. As we mentioned, the most important part is the money's back. They find the $5,000 bill, and probably my favorite line that Elliott Gould has in the whole movie is Augustine asks him, what's this? And he goes, a picture of James Madison. But the money's been dropped off as Eileen returned the cash to Augustine, and then she takes off. Marlowe chases her. He's on foot. He's trying to chase her away in the car, and she gets away. Not before, though, he runs in the street trying to get her attention, or at least, jump on the car or something. He gets hit by a car, wakes up 3 days later in the hospital. A really good fake out. Yes. Is the first thing we see in the hospital is a guy who's in a whole body cast. His head's wrapped. One of those, you should see the other guy type of thing.
Yeah, I like Elliott Gould's line there, too. He's like, I've seen all your movies. To the guy with the bandage.
He returns to Mexico, though, to learn through bribing the authorities there that Lennox is still alive, that his death was faked, and that he went down there, and this is where, we kind of put it all together. Him and Eileen were in on it all.
Okay, we don't put it together, Alex. Altman just shamelessly take us on a car ride that's 10 minutes of exposition.
It's
the Jurassic Park scene where Mr. DNA tells you how they got the dinosaurs back.
Right.
It's just him pointing with laser pointer, explaining to you exactly what happened. And it's not at all what Phillip Marlowe thought it was.
By the way, like Terry Lennox, that guy is Jim Bouton. I don't know. He was a professional pitcher. Like he was
played for the Yankees.
Yeah, a couple of other baseball pitcher. I don't know why he's in this. It's very strange. He's not that great of an actor, but he's just not apologetic either. Like he's like, yeah, I killed my wife. Yeah, it was pretty bad. And then he's like, but you asked me to drive you to the border for an escape, and he's like, yeah, I was in a jam. That's what friends are for. Like that's what you're supposed to do. And then he calls Marlowe a loser. You're like, you never learned. You're a born loser.
He's not wrong. I mean,
right. And that's when he just shoots him. Like all of this, he just like blows him away.
Were you guys surprised to learn that Phillip Marlowe had a gun on him the entire time?
Yeah, he could have used it in different situations, probably.
Might have been helpful at some points along the way. But yeah, I was surprised. Like he didn't really show, like, you know, for the most part, Marlowe is, for a detective and in all the difficult situations he's in, he's pretty easygoing throughout most of this. He doesn't really slap anybody around or do anything physical. And then at the end, just like without hesitation, he just shoots his friend.
He shoots him in cold blood and then dances away.
And then he passes Eileen on the way on his little dance.
They don't even exchange a word or anything.
It's literally the scene from Mask of the Phantasm where Andrea shows up and the Joker, he's not the Joker yet, but he comes out of her dad's house and she just looks at him and realizes what's happened and just runs and sees, no.
Elliott Gould as a Joker. Oh, what could have been. So was this the whole point of the movie? Was the whole point of the movie to take this kind of 70s burnout detective and break him to the point where he becomes a murderer? Because if that was the point, I didn't feel it. He was so chill the entire movie, and then he turns on a dime.
That's an interesting take. I don't know. Like, there is one thing that brought up, like, an interview with Altman had said the idea that he really wanted, as far as their take on the role, was that basically the idea was that the Phillip Marlowe of the 40s or whatever had just like woken up in the 70s. That was their general idea. They called him Philip Van Winkle, I think, on like, you know, as a Rip Van Winkle like play on things. But that was the idea, is that guy of that 40s sort of moralistic sensibility would wake up in the 70s, and how would he interact and do things? And in the book, because he does not kill Terry Lennox in the book. So that was a big thing too. And when Altman read the script, that's one thing. He had two things. When he went to the studio, he said, I will do it if Elliott Gould is Phillip Marlowe, and if you let me shoot like the end scene, if you let me shoot him, like him shoot him in the end. Those were his two conditions.
So what's he do in the book? Does he just bum a cigarette and sits down with him, has a drink?
You know, it's been a minute. I think he confronts him. Maybe he turns him over to the cops or something. It has been a while since I've read this book, so I can't say for certain. I just know he doesn't kill him in the end. Yeah.
Well, Alex, you're notorious for sometimes siding with the bad guy. Are you with Elliott Gould here, or are you with Lennox? Is Elliott Gould overreacting when he shoots his former friend?
No, man, he could have died many times over for that. Elliott Gould should have shot him. We get the classic slow-mo fall and then the red paint mixed in the water where he falls. But yeah, dude, Elliott Gould and Phillip Marlowe could have died. Wade could have killed him. Varinger's clearly killed people before, far worse, like dissected him, disemboweled him, drawn and quartered him.
Arnold could have just ripped an arm off without even thinking about it.
And beat him to death with it. And Augustine, could have snapped his fingers. Augustine was, seconds away from cutting his dick off. And so and Elliott Gould lost his $5,000 bill just to, find out that he got screwed in the end. So
and he lost his cat.
Yeah, that's the worst part. I'm not even a cat person, but that's the worst part. And Eileen is lucky that he didn't give her the same fate. But in many ways, he gave her a far worse one, because now she's stuck in Mexico and doesn't know what to do. So just getting to a foreign country and having to lay low to begin with, and then all your plans go awry. It's like, man, what the fuck do I do now? all that was missing at the end is that the Elliott Gould didn't jump and click his heels and it freeze framed while he was in midair.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're starting to bleed into some real talk here. So, Julio, I think it's as good of an opportunity as we're going to get to just go ahead and move on to the second half.
Yes. So let me go feed the cat, and then we'll get back to this.
The curry brand cat food.
That's a curry brand.
And it happens every day when some passerby invites your eye to come her way. Even as she smiles a quick hello, you let her.
Hello, this is Phillip Marlowe.